Welcome to Retail Retold, the stories behind how that store landed in your neighborhood. I'm Chris Ressa, in conversation with the people and stories shaping retail and real estate. Brought to you by DLC.
Welcome to Retail Retold, everyone. I'm your host, Chris Ressa. Today I'm joined by Ethan Chernofsky from Placer.ai. Welcome to the show, Ethan.
Hey, Chris, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I think most of the listeners know, but for those who don't, why don't you tell a little bit about who you are and what Placer is and what they do?
Sure. So I lead Placer's marketing. I've been here for about 5 years, which is essentially the lifespan of the company at this stage. And Placer's a location analytics company. What that means, very, very simply, people are voting with their feet every single day. We're showing you how they're doing that across the country to retail locations via location analytics and giving some insight into what's really happening in the physical world.
Excellent. And for those of you out there, I think we have a cool episode. So we have the top 5 traffic trends thus far in 2024. And with that, let's jump right in, Ethan. Give us number 5.
All right. So number 5, we're going a little obvious here, but I want to do a twist on it. So obviously value is going to be a huge trend. This year was a big trend last year, and that kind of chasing a value. But within that context, there's something that gets overlooked. And in our mind, that is the affordable luxury. And we are seeing the power of that kind of group or subcategory of goods and services already have power early in 2024. So what do we mean by the affordable luxury? When we look at consumer spending patterns, we see that things are down in a lot of areas where we would normally want to splurge or treat ourselves. But even when that happens, there is still that need to, give ourselves a little victory, a little reward for the hard work we're putting in and find that area. And that's what we're calling the affordable luxury. So we think about the coffee out, right? Is that a value play? Of course not, right? It's far more expensive than the coffee you could make at home. Yet our coffee category saw visits up 1% in January, and January was a tough month for many categories, and up 3.5% year over year in February. And that's, by the way, if we look at full service restaurants, they were down 5.5% in January and just up just less than 1% in February. So we see the value there. Other things that fit with that affordable luxury tag are things like health and beauty. So the Ultas, the Sephoras, the CVS's and Walgreens, even the grocery stores that have those products that make you feel better about yourself, the creams, that investment is something that we see as very powerful and potent in 2024.
So interesting. That's not where I thought you were going with affordable luxury. I would call that disposable income or discretionary spending. I would call that value discretionary spending is what I would call it.
So the inspiration actually came from when we were doing research ahead of this, right when this kind of economic challenge was kicking off a couple of years ago. If you look at categories that they were traditionally positioning as doing well within those periods, there were a handful of categories that they were referring to. And again, we'll find the link for you, but referring to as these kind of extras, places where we're spending more than we could on a cheaper option, but it's a more value oriented way of finding that kind of pursuit of self, right? A selfish spend that still fits within budget. And I think these are the categories that check that box.
Totally. And the only reason I call it discretionary is because, well, like when I heard you say luxury, I thought you were going to say like a handbag company that like had a sale. But I think I think it's an interesting point. So people are trying to find value in their discretionary spending that's not need based.
Exactly, while keeping that discretionary spending.
Got it. Very interesting. And the example you gave was expensive coffee. Traffic was up January and February.
Yeah, absolutely.
And up from where? Same period last year or up from
Yep.
the end of the year?
So up from same period last year, which by the way was a strong period for the coffee category last year. So it's strength on strength.
Strength of strength. All right. Excellent. What's your takeaway on that?
I honestly think that the places where it's interesting to us are, hey, if I'm a shopping center owner and I know I have these assets available, am I doing what I can to kind of lean in and push them in the right direction? And that's especially true if I don't have a big chain, right? If I have a local player, are you kind of pushing your opportunity here extra because you rest within that space? And then the other place is when we talk to kind of retailers and product companies, do you understand which of your products have an extra pull at the current moment and which things you want to emphasize? Because sometimes watching until they realize what is actually kind of driving extra demand, you've missed some of that window.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. All right. Moving on up. Number 4.
All right. So number 4 is context. And the thing that triggered this for us was we preach context quite a bit, but what triggered this for us was some of the news that came out around the fitness category. So essentially what came out was, hey, fitness is up year over year in January and February, but they're only up a couple of percentage points compared to 2023 when that category was up as much as 10 to 15% in certain months year over year. And they were saying, uh-oh, this is a slowdown in fitness. And this is one of those areas where kind of the sirens go off of like, we need to have context here. And the example we love to give is, imagine a great basketball player who's dropping 35 points a game one season. And the next season, he's only dropping 36 points a game. And so the year over year jump is smaller than it was before. But it's only smaller because they already made a huge jump. So there is an element where we need to remember that some of these segments that did exceptionally well in recent years are going to have to almost inevitably flatten out even a little bit. And so when we see things like 5% growth for the fitness category, we should be standing up and applauding how well some of these chains are doing in terms of overall visits, because we're comparing it to these periods where there was already huge visit jumps. So this brick and mortar fitness kick has been so powerful and so significant, especially when we consider what the conversation was June, July of 2020, when we were convinced that the future of fitness was just Peloton, a smartwatch, and a mirror device in your house.
And going for a run. And going for a run. Ethan, are you not hearing me?
Now I hear you. You kind of shut off for a second.
I said, and going for a run. That I thought we were going to do that.
Why go for a run? That sounds like the worst.
It does. So, okay. So the next trend is we need context. And so the way I interpret what you're saying is as follows, is that a lot of categories are up, but just because they're not up as much as they were last year in terms of traffic, doesn't mean they're not doing well. They're actually doing really well.
100%. And we also need it when we think about downs, by the way. So look at the electronics sector or home improvement or even movie theaters. These were kind of all darlings at some point in the last few years. There are other things that play into visit declines that don't mean that the sky is falling. They mean that we're in for a period that is different than what we just went through. So we think about home improvement electronics, the pull forward of demand, the economic situation. Do we really feel less positive about Home Depot, Lowe's, et cetera, because that sector is seeing not quite the heights that it hit in the years prior? I would argue no. And I think the same thing is true for other spaces. Look, movie theaters is a great example. A stellar year in 2023. But there's so many things working against that segment this year that if we see visits down throughout the year, I don't think that should fundamentally change whether we are bullish about the sector, as long as the underlying strategy doesn't shift.
All right. I think I like number 4, context about the numbers. Okay. What's number 3?
Number 3 is continued strength. And it's especially continued strength in one area that I think if we kind of go back in our 2019 time machine, was getting pretty hard hit. And for me, that's grocery. So when we look at the grocery sector, when we think about the split between superstores and discount and dollar, so the overall visit share, okay? In January of 2019, grocery held 45% of that overall visit share. Superstores held about 41%, and discount and dollar held about just under 14%. As of January 2024, grocery had gone from 45.4% to 45.1%. Superstores had gone down by about 1% and 2%, excuse me, and dollar stores had grown by about 2% in terms of overall visit share. The steadiness of grocery, when we think about how hard hit or the narrative around that segment of how hard hit it was supposed to be, is incredibly impressive. I think it speaks in part to the rise of some really impressive brands like Aldi, Lidl, Grocery Outlet, and others, but also to the tremendous resiliency of some of these kind of classic anchors. So the Publixes, the Albertsons, the Krogers, the different banners within them, and how strong they've been even in this period of flux, and also how they've been able to hold on to some of the gains they made during the pandemic when they had a distinct advantage because of their essential retail status.
Okay, let's stick on this one for a second. So let's define the terms. So for everyone, superstores are what?
Superstores are Target, Walmart, your big box giants that have everything all under one roof.
Wholesale clubs in that?
Yep.
Okay. And department stores are not.
Department stores are not.
Okay. Number two, grocery. That is Publix, ShopRite, Kroger, Albertsons.
Absolutely.
And then discount and dollar. I think we know what the dollar stores are. What are the discounters?
So, I mean, Big Lots, Five Below, that wider category, Family Dollar, obviously, Dollar General, the like.
Got it. Okay. And you said that the tough time that you were speaking to, were you speaking that to hold on to the market share that they had gained in 2020 and 21? Is that,
Yeah.
this period of time that was challenged?
If we think about the conversation in 2019, and this doesn't necessarily, apply to everyone, but there was a very loud voice that said, and if you looked at it historically, it was true. Grocery was losing wallet share over time to QSR, to restaurants, to a whole range of different things.
Sure.
And the threat from grocery elements within Target and Walmart, grocery elements within kind of the dollar players,
I
was
see.
considered the next big bite. That didn't happen yet. And that's not because those brands didn't do things well. Like Target and Walmart are doing some really brilliant things. Again, the wholesale clubs have made huge strides. The dollar players have made some really smart decisions and rapid expansion. So their ability to grab more visit share is significant. And so I think the capacity of grocery to hold their position is something that is especially noteworthy in this current environment.
Interesting. Okay, now I'm picking up what you're throwing down. I like it. I like that one. Uh, I think it is pretty remarkable actually, because there was this period of time from a wallet share perspective where I think it was like coming out of the Great Recession in the 08, 09, where it flipped and more dollars were spent in restaurants than they were in actual grocery stores. It was like close, but
Mhm.
it was for the first time in history. And obviously in COVID that shifted, and for them to hang on to shares is quite remarkable. Uh, I think we have some amazing grocers in America. So
By the way, I think it's a super important point of like how effective some of these players are. And when you think about when you look at like the regional map of who the top grocery banners are within any given region, the diversity of it, I think is a big piece of why some of these players are so strong because they can focus on being the local dominant player.
yeah. All right. That brings us to number two. It's the second traffic trend in 24.
Okay, this one we're going to call the return. Okay. So there are a handful of areas where we are seeing really significant and really interesting recoveries. The most notable is the return to office. So when we look at the overall recovery of visits,
Are you saying people have to go back to work now?
I'm saying they're going back and we are underestimating how much they're going back. So
Oh,
So I think if you look at, obviously, when we look at nationwide, we're seeing visits somewhere about 40 to 30% down compared to where they were pre-pandemic. But that's weighed down heavily by cities that are harder hit, like San Francisco, and it's pulled up by cities that are coming back faster. New York, Miami come to mind. The power of the office is a very significant piece that we need to discuss. It doesn't mean that hybrid work isn't here, and it doesn't mean that hybrid work isn't having a significant impact. It just means that the expectations of, we're gonna go back 2 days a week, it's actually gonna look a lot more like 3 to 4 days a week on average at these major office buildings, than it's gonna look at kind of the further end of that spectrum. And what it has also shown us is that being the top buildings in a space really matters. So being in a major city, there are obviously certain dynamics that play into this. So, for example, if you have a family, you're more likely to go into the office less than if you are single. If you obviously proximity plays a major role. So the amount of time you need to commute, the level of role you have within a company can play a role. The sector you work in can play a role. But overall, I think the power of the office recovery is more significant than we're sometimes giving it credit for. And I think we're going to see things balance out a lot closer to that 4 days a week from the office than the 2 that maybe we were initially predicting a few years back.
Has the power of the office or people's return to work brought down traffic anywhere?
It is returning prior patterns of consumer behavior. So I don't these the one of the things that we're seeing is very interesting is at the peak of hybrid work, right? Obviously, a lot more work at home and a lot less from the office. We were seeing much fewer grocery visits on the weekend, right? From a proportion compared to pre-pandemic. We were seeing many more visits during the heart of the day and much less between like 6 to 9 p.m. Those are all reverting back. So we're seeing a lot more, grocery or superstore visits on weekends or in the evenings compared to where they were just a year or 2 ago. We're seeing midweek visits and the balance between midweek and weekend visits start to balance out again. So I think those things are very highly correlated where the patterns that we saw that were centered around a certain magnitude of hybrid work are starting to shift back and look a lot closer to what they looked like pre-pandemic.
Got it. But they're not pre-pandemic yet. There's still some people who were shopping at noon at the grocery
Yeah.
store.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what it's interesting, one of the clarion calls for us is if you benefit from that behavior, this is when you need to make sure you're incentivizing it because the opportunity could be slipping away from you.
Okay. Interesting. I think that's
Second
yeah. No, there's more.
second return. I think we have to give like a tip of the cap to malls at a certain point, right? I think there was this period where the mall is dying, the demise of the mall, the country is over-malled, and there are elements of truth to that. But if you look at top-tier malls, their recoveries, even compared to pre-pandemic numbers, so we're not just looking year over year, year over 2 year, are getting stronger and stronger over time. When you look at 21 to 22 to 23, that pace is consistent and it's getting stronger and stronger. And I think we need to give a little bit of credit to the power of the mall, some of the great decisions that was made by a lot of these landlords and how they changed their perspective. And by the way, this is way before the pandemic. This is 5, 10 years ago to start saying we need more diversification of tenants. We need to be less oriented towards apparel and beauty. We need to be more focused on experiences and dining and things like fitness within the mall space. And that's all playing out in a really powerful way right now.
Okay. Interesting tidbits. I think on the return to office, I think we're going to hit some equilibrium. I'm not sure it's ever going to be back to pre-pandemic levels. I think there's some level of hybrid that is here to stay, no doubt.
Where do you think you have to pick your days of the week? How many days is the average American office worker going back to the office?
I'm sure there's actual stats. I'm sure there's actual stats.
Where do you think it's going to land?
I think it'll land at 3.
So this is our gamble. This is Chris. This is ahead of the next time we get to see each other. This is you going 3. I'm gonna go. It's gonna be closer to 4.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 3. I'm gonna go 3. A- And I think I think one of the things that is important to that is how the math plays out, because I think the amount of remote workers has increased, and that's changed forever. So those people go in zero and they're never going back. And there's some level of where that the amount of people who have the ability to work remote has increased. And I think a significant portion of them are going to be able to work remote for a long period of time.
I don't disagree with you. I think the other thing that works in your favor is one of the clearest patterns when you look at office visitation data is Monday is down significantly from a proportion of visits, and Friday is down significantly. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are the closest. So people are saying, all right, if I got to start the week, maybe I want an extra long weekend where I can stay at the place I spent the weekend, ease into my weekend on that Friday. There's a lot of rational, smart thinking to the way the office recovery is happening that shows you that hybrid isn't going anywhere. I do think that question is, though, is the average 3, where does the average rest between 3 to 4? Because I don't think it'll be more than 4, and I don't think it'll be less than 3.
I think the math depends on how you include the remote workers. If we're taking an
Mhm.
average, is a remote worker zero in that equation, or are they not in the equation?
It's a great question. I think you have to remove them. I
Okay.
think
Well
you know
then,
what? No, you have to compare. No, you have to compare to pre what the visits were to the same buildings in 2019 versus today.
yeah. And I think there's this conundrum that companies have where it's like, all right, some people are remote and some people are hybrid. Well, and how does that work?
Yeah, it's we had one HR leader of a very large company tell us, and this was 2 years ago, so it's possible this person's opinion has changed. But he said remote work and hybrid work, or excuse me, working from a place where they don't have a location, they don't have an office, you can't come in at all. He said that's always existed for our company, but it's existed for a very small group. So that group is likely going to expand, but it'll always remain a small portion. That was this one individual's perspective.
Let me, okay. So Placer's been around 5 years, right?
Yep.
How many people work remote?
Our entire US team is remote. Yeah.
Okay, case closed. Now, what's the top trend? What's the top trend
I think
in,
okay,
in 2024? Top trend.
this is my favorite trend. And there's I've heard it called 2 things. I have a preference. I'll tell you why. So the top trend for me is the store as a platform. Now, it's very often called the store as a medium. Some people and there's a lot of different areas in terms of where it's focused on. So we think about things like retail media, right? In the brick and mortar environment, we've got colleagues who've attended some of the big retail shows. It is all the buzz, obviously at the advertising shows, product shows as well. Everyone's talking about retail media in the brick and mortar environment. Why? There's massive amounts of eyeballs. There's a unique ability to reach people while they're in discovery mode, close to the point of sale, when there's high intent, and it is about maximizing the store. But the second we realize that this is about taking the 4 walls of the store and saying it's about a lot more than sales per square foot, we have to acknowledge all the other pieces that come here. So buy online, pick up in store, and delivery from the location is part of this same trend. Every utilization of the store that goes beyond that pure sales per square foot perspective is about the expansion of what we value from physical locations. And it's one of the key elements that's going to continue driving so many brands to expand their retail fleets, to go offline when they had only been online prior, because there are so many values to brick and mortar locations that we were not considering in the past. And I think the greater we recognize how significant those values are, that we're able to measure them and understand their direct impact on the business, the more we're going to be able to lean into them.
So I agree. I'm going to give you a challenging response here, not to
I
throw you
love it.
off. Okay. Look, I'm not sure you will. How is that a traffic trend?
How will what traffic trend?
The store as a platform.
So there's a couple of interesting things here. If you measure it improperly, it's going to be misleading. So for example, if we measure, I open a new store in New York. I have no locations in New York. Am I just measuring how many visits come into that store? Am I measuring how many visits come into that store over time? Am I also measuring, have I seen an e-commerce uptick since I launched that store? So the store, not just for the things it sells within that location, for the eyeballs, the visibility it brought. Am I measuring it where returns to the location are a benefit because I know that online returns are more expensive? Am I measuring it from the perspective of the distribution it's enabled and how it's brought down my costs of delivery or improved my speed of delivery? Because if I'm including all of those metrics into the mix, I think it's going to trend in a very positive way.
I say the way my takeaway now that I understand what you're talking about is a single visit means a lot more than we thought it did.
Excellent point.
That's my takeaway when I hear you say that. A single visit to the store means a lot more than it once did.
I'll tell you, you know what I thought, I walked into a retail location for Untuck It a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it was the perfect example of this. You walk into the store, it's sparsely filled. There's an entire rack that says "Try Me On" shirts. An entire rack, like literally 25% of the things available for me to look at that were products that I could buy were there with a tag that said "Try Me On," which tells me here's a retailer that recognizes that a lot of their consumer base wants to find their fit and then continue purchasing online in the future. So the store is a showroom. The store is a place to enable lifetime value. The store is not just about, do I turn every person who walks in into a purchaser in that specific location?
Okay. I like purchases happening in stores, but I'll take that. I'll take it. I see. I'm picking up what you're throwing down.
But I mean, this is one of the things that I always find interesting, especially within the retail real estate community, is it very often feels, and this is as an outsider, that stores don't get all the credit they deserve. And when we hear about things like returns coming off sales per square foot, I'm like, that's silly. That's not that shouldn't be the case because when I can do a return in a store, I have the chance for the person to upsell. I have the chance for the person to have a return that's less costly than if they have to deliver it. I feel like we haven't fully leaned in to just how valuable a brick and mortar presence really is for so many brands. And obviously this is different sector to sector.
I love that. Uh, I'll see if in our next deal we can try to get that in the lease. Uh, I love it, but uh, I think I think the landlords, challenge you, right? And my response to someone not transacting in the store is a little because we've been trained that that's what the retailer cares about. If they tell us that success in the store is more than the transaction, but that hasn't translated yet into at least documents and contracts where the success of the store is more than the transaction. When that happens, I'll be like, all right, great. But that really hasn't translated yet, even though it might be happening.
So I think that's the key. One of the things that's been really interesting for us is when we speak to kind of folks in the advertising community who are starting to use, again, a product that was built for real estate and retail, who are using it to understand the impact of their billboards and are using it to understand the impact of again, retail media within these physical locations is a metric that shows impressions. Like, what's the reach of this specific location? You start to realize that, oh, this is coming. And the more we can put metrics behind it, the more powerful it will be. And again, just think about the world of online media. People were paying for impressions, and those impressions, again, an online visit is what? A minute, 2 minutes. The conversion rate is maybe 1% if you're very, very good at what you do. What's the percentage conversion rate for a store when someone walks into one of your centers, Chris? It's a
Yeah.
lot higher than that. How much
It's a lot
time are they spending there?
Yeah.
What's the impact of that interaction? And that's why we're so excited about it.
I'm glad we ended on this one. Now I get it's a traffic trend and I like it. Okay. Ethan, this has been great. Thank you so much. So, as a recap, give us the 5 again so everyone knows.
Oh my God, now I got to remember all the things we discussed for the last.
Yeah.
So we went 1, affordable luxuries,
That's 5.
or 5, excuse me, affordable luxuries, but discretionary luxuries, discretionary spend, whatever we decided. Fair enough. 2, context in data. 3, continued strength for grocery. I went 5. Whatever one, second to last,
Yeah.
was the return, and it was specifically focused on office and malls. And the last one was the store as a platform.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man. This has been great.
Chris, pleasure as always. Thanks so much for having me.
That was great.
Appreciate you watching. Hit subscribe. See you in the next one.